Thank you for joining us tonight. St. John Flames earned the split with the Bulldogs over the weekend. Calgary Flames General Manager Al Coates drops by for a chat, and Sheldon Kennedy makes his on-ice debut over the weekend. All that and a whole lot more coming up on Time Out right here on TVNB. And a very good Monday evening. Welcome into Time Out here on TVNB. Jim Hennessy along with you for the next 30 minutes. We're going to be chatting some sports, but first off, we had a chance to sit down and chat with Calgary Flames General Manager Al Coates over the weekend, and here's what Al had to say. Al, we'll get started with you were in attendance for Friday night's game, 8-1 shellacking at the hands of the Hamilton Bulldogs. Your feeling on the game?
Well, so much for the myth that goals are down in the professional hockey. It was an interesting game. They started actually not bad. We were down 2-1 at the end of the one, and we took I thought a very undisciplined penalty early in the second period. That allowed them to go in the power play. They have a great power play. I mean, Hamilton's a very good team, so as much as we're disappointed in our own team's performance, you also have to look at what the other team was able to accomplish. And anytime we gave them an opening, whether it was through a bad, careless penalty, which we had 3 or 4 of those in the game last night, or a defensive breakdown, they were able to capitalize on it. So you have those nights. I think the best thing to do is try and learn from it and see if you can't bounce back and do something about it. The key really is to see is how we react to it tonight as a result of what happened last night.
Now, with you being in town this weekend, of course, when people start coming through the turnstiles, look up in the box and see you sitting up there, they're wondering, who have you got your eye on? Are you here to see anybody in particular, or just kind of looking around?
No, not really. It's just that time of the year. We're 15, 16, 17 games in both leagues. We're potentially talking trade with our own club in Calgary, and when you're doing that, you're looking to see if we made a move and we lost this at the major league level, then what is in St. John that could conceivably either in the right away or in the long term come in and fill in that particular spot. So it's really an opportunity for me. I was in Montreal for our game on Thursday and here on Wednesday, but to come down and try and marry the two teams together. Sure. And look at it from that standpoint, as well as to see another team. We were able to see a team on Wednesday night here, an NHL affiliate, and then of course our arch rival, the Edmonton Oilers, to see what they might have coming in the next 2 or 3 years.
Speaking of the parent club, let's talk about the start so far.
Start's been pretty good. We were in Tokyo, which seemed like a long way away, and it was a long way away, and we were fortunate enough to come out of there with 3 or 4 points. We came home, and we only had one home game, and that was against Toronto, and that wasn't a very good outing in front of a sold-out audience in Calgary, but then went on the road, and our schedule was tough. We played Detroit right away and played Dallas right away, and interesting enough, the game against Detroit, we lost 2-0. We should have won the game for sure. And we had some of the similar problems. I talked about, you know, some bad penalties here last night in this game, and we had a real problem with that with our big club early in the year. We addressed, and it's not a question of not being good enough. It's really a question in my mind of being selfish as an individual in a team concept. If you're not willing to take a whack in the back of the head or something sometime in order for the team to do better, then we have a much bigger problem, and we had to address that with our big club. We're still taking a penalty or 2 per game more than we would like to take, but we're an awful lot better than we were. The trade really helped us with Chicago. Jamie Allison going over to the Blackhawks, good young player, and I think he'll be a good young player. But we got 2 guys, Chance and Dubinsky, to come in. They're both real good, solid defensive players that have fit quite nicely into what we're trying to do. So we get Reggett back in a couple of weeks. He's been tremendous for us. Both Moss and Jaguar have been good for us also. but we like the stability of the veteran goaltender in Kenny Reggett and one of the kids of our young guys. And obviously, from a local standpoint, that means we can get somebody back here also.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the goaltending for a little bit. How is Ken Reggett feeling? You expect him to be back anytime soon? And for Flames fans here, do we get Giguère back?
Well, Reggett is actually, we thought that he might have been on this trip with us. He kind of plateaued and didn't get any better, and so we have to kind of go back to square one a little bit and reduce his activity to see whether we can get the back stabilized again. And so we're probably looking at a couple weeks, quite frankly, before that all comes together. And then clearly the intention would be then as soon as he's back, then one of the other two goalies would be here, and whether it's Giguère or Moss. Moss kind of earned the job, to be honest, in training camp ahead of Giguère, and that only makes sense too. He's a year older and has a year's more experience than JS does. So our feeling was that we think Giguère is a tremendous prospect and a great young goaltender, and that we wanted him to play virtually every game in the American League this year, occasionally on a back-to-backer that another goalie would play in his place, but basically that he would carry the load 60 games, 65 games here this year, and then hopefully he's ready to make the move a year from now. So we didn't anticipate an injury to our number one guy, but those things happen, and you can't do anything about it. You just have to make the best of it. Meantime, I don't think that people should suggest that the goaltending here isn't good enough without him here. He's a great young goalie, Giguère, but these guys have proven that they can play pretty well at this level also. And unfortunately, the goaltender is always the last line of defense. It's him, then it's the defense, and then there's some forward making a mistake somewhere. It just proves that it really is a team game, and the team can really help a goaltender, and a goaltender can really help a team. Last night, we didn't really have anybody helping anybody.
A lot of rumors flying around this weekend that you guys are set to pull the trigger on a deal with Toronto Maple Leafs. Maybe Theo Fleury ending up in Toronto, Felix Potvin ending out in Calgary. What's the deal on that?
Well, that's kind of an old rumor. It's like Brian Burke flying all over North America trying to drum up interest for Pavel Bure. I think the reason that he's doing that is he doesn't have any interest in at least in the magnitude of a deal that he wants to make. And the same thing with Toronto. It's no secret. I mean, since August or July, I suppose, from the day that they signed Cujo, that they were going to move the other guy and try and make their team better. And so we've been, and Fleury in particular has been the victim, let me say, of all of that scrutiny and rumor mill for a long time, because he has an unrestricted status at the end of this year. The interesting thing is that there are a tremendous amount of real good players, 8 or 9 or 10 of them in the league, top players, a couple in Montreal and 2 in Colorado and all over the league type of thing, that are in the same situation as Fleury is, but yet it seems it's his name that always surfaces. I mean, anybody would be a fool not to want Fleury on their team. He's a great player and a great competitor, and obviously he would look good in anybody else's uniform. But we did have some discussions with Toronto and later in the summer and through training camp about a number of things, not about that in particular, but we haven't even talked to them for 2-3 weeks at least now.
Speaking of the rule changes, how do you like them so far? You watch many games, 2-referee system. Do you like that, or would you rather see it go back to the way it was?
No, I really like it myself. I voted for it, and I'm going to stick by it. I think that the 2-referee system is good. I think it's going to give us some longevity of the better officials, that they can work longer than they're presently working. You skate about 5 miles in a game with 2 referees and 8 miles in a game with a single referee. That's a big difference on a lifespan of official. But I think the single biggest thing by far is that we are going through a little bit of a culture shock here on the way that we're playing the game versus the way I think most of us want the game to be played. My own view is that we need 2 referees to teach the players how to play the game the way we want it to be played. And in other words, we don't want interference all over the ice. We want the good players, the highly skilled players, the Martin St. Louis, for example, at this level, and Dominic Elling, these guys, to have open ice and not getting hooked and pulled down all over the place. Because I think that's what the fan wants. The fan wants to see speed, they want to see skill, they want to see goals. And when somebody knows, it's very simple really, when somebody knows that somebody behind them is watching them, then they're very unlikely to try and do what they would have otherwise done. Sure. And that's my point on the two-referee system, is it's to create and build a culture that's not presently existing with the way we're playing the game. And I really see it having an impact. I think two referees are good. We had it right from the outset of training camp. We had it over in Tokyo in one of our two games over there. And there was penalties being called there that were frustrating the players, but it's like anything else. It's like the crease rule, and it's like the change to the offside rule, and it's like 2 more feet behind the net. Players adapt, always adapt to whatever the rule changes are, because it's their game and it's their livelihood and their business. And they are adapting to this also, and I think the end result of it is we're going to have a better game.
Obviously, it's been a long time since anything really to celebrate hugely out in Calgary. '89 was the last championship team. Do you feel that you're on course to make a good run for it this year so far, Al?
Yeah, I think so. The league is really tough. For years we've been talking at the NHL level about creating parity in hockey, and if we create parity, then the fan is the ultimate benefactor of that, because every game is a good game. It's a competitive game. And when you look at the standings, whether it's yesterday, today, or if it's tomorrow, you're probably going to see a spread of 8 or 9 points from 1 through 27 in the league, and that's parity. What comes with that is that in everybody's restrictive market or exclusive market is that there's always something wrong with your team, because we have a tendency to live in a fishbowl, and we don't know what's happening in 26 other cities. We only know what's happening in our own city. But in terms of our own team, I think we've made the necessary changes to be very competitive. We do have an issue with Fleury to try and deal with, whether to keep him and try and sign him at the end of the year, or to move him. And if we move him, we certainly need to try and get value and not hurt our team. I mean, he's one of the better players in the league right now. But we're very competitive. Our coaching staff is good. We have some depth here in St. John to be able to call on if we run into a bigger injury problem than what we already have. We've got 3 guys out in Calgary at the moment. So I think that we're right in the thick of it. We have I like the philosophy that we're working with there now. I like the mentality of our team, the culture of our team that is extremely competitive. And the one thing, normally when somebody plays Calgary, they know they're in for a long night normally. And with the changes to the Bury, for example, coming in last year, Steve Smith coming back to play, acquiring Housley over the summertime, Regic coming in, Bobby Basson, who's yet to play, coming in from Dallas. We've been able to add 4 experienced, quality veteran players to an otherwise very young team, 14 players under the age of 24 on our team. And we had some of those veteran players last year. But these guys are different from a supporting cast standpoint. They've all won. They're all specialists in their own particular area of the game. And so I like the way that it's come together and is coming together. It's a long way to go, but we're off to a pretty good start.
Beautiful. Thanks, Al. Enjoy the rest of the game tonight.
Thank you very much.
TVNB. the New Brunswick Channel.
Hey, thank you for tuning back in. Time out here on TVNB. Certainly hope you and your family had a great weekend. Jim Hennessy joined by AHL office official Harold Nason in the studio now. Harold, nice to have you back.
Thanks for having me back, Jim.
Hey, not a problem. Let's get right into it. Flames and Bulldogs split a pair of games over the weekend, an 8-1 shellacking at the hands of the Bulldogs on Friday night. Let's touch on that one first.
It was a debacle. I mean, they were out of it immediately. They gave up shots on the first two goals, two shots, 2 goals, and it was downhill from there.
Right.
But it's funny, in the American Hockey League, it goes like that. They come back on Saturday night and showed their mettle with a 6-2 win.
Absolutely.
So I mean, it's a funny league, and I mean, any night they can fall behind quickly, and that's the end of it. And then they'll come back the next night and look what happened. A 6-2, a very impressive win too.
Absolutely. Let's talk about Matt Eiser a little bit. Of course, Friday night gives up the first 2 goals on the first 2 shots of the game. Now here's a guy that so far this year, when he has got the nod to go between the pipes, gets off to a slow start, but normally it takes him a while to build up. That's got to be a huge concern for Rick Five and Jeff Perry.
Well, yeah, the 3 games previous to that, they'd given up a goal on their first shot going into Friday night, and I mean, yeah, it is a concern. And with John Sebastian Giguère, looks like he's becoming a fixture up in Calgary. You know,
making a name for himself.
He's playing splendidly up there. It's going to be a bit of a trial, and we're going to have to see one of these guys, Karpenko or Eisler, can step up and show their mettle. As
we heard in the interview with Al Coates when we started the show off, when I was talking to Al, he just kind of had a grin on his face when we talked about the goaltending situation, because with Kenny Reggett, his back is questionable at best. He said that Kenny is set to come back later on this week, I should say. And the thing is now, you've got Tyler Moss, Ken Reggett, Jean Sebastian playing as well as he is, and now there's rumors floating around that there could be another trade to bring Jeff Hackett in to the Calgary fold. So, well,
I've heard the same thing too, and the problem is with Reggett is he missed 3/4 of last year with the back, and people with back problems readily know that they can be debilitating and they can be an extended.
Especially at that man's age. I mean, Kenny's faced a lot of rubber over the years.
Sure has, and he's played well in his stay, but I think he's close to 34, 35, somewhere in that area, and his health has to be a concern. I mean, we've got a couple of good goaltenders there, Tyler Moss and J.S. Giguère, but what does that leave for the farm?
Exactly, exactly. So it could be tough days goaltending-wise for the St. John Flames coming up. Of course, they're on the road Wednesday night in Portland. What do you see coming up in that game?
Well, I see Portland's struggling. They're struggling very hard down there, and I mean, I'm looking for a big win from the Flames down in Portland, and that'll lead them into a very important weekend next weekend. You know, Fredericton's in and Hartford's in.
Hartford's always a
strong team.
Tough challenge. Hartford really gave them a run last year.
Yeah.
But let's move on to what I am calling the feel-good story of '98 so far. Sheldon Kennedy makes his return to the ice on Friday night with the Manitoba Moose, scores the game-winning goal. I mean, after everything that Kennedy just gets done, you know, rollerblading across Canada, raising a lot of money for a great cause, and now he's back and he doesn't seem to have missed a stride. I mean, he's in fantastic shape, obviously.
Well, yeah, but he's starting to get things back together now. He worked out briefly with the national team in Calgary just to get his skating legs back underneath him. Now he's on a 25-game tryout with the Moose in Manitoba, and hopefully something good will come from that. Because, as you say, a feel-good story. I mean, here's a guy who's had horrors to speak of in his junior career, and look at him now. I mean, he's overcome all that stuff. He's got a foundation going to benefit abused children, and now he's trying to get his hockey career back online, and doing a pretty incredible job.
No question about that. Let's flip back to the NHL. Of course, earlier this week, big trade with our Montreal Canadiens and Chicago Blackhawks, the 2 biggest names that come out of the 6-player swap. Of course, Jocelyn Thibault on his way to the Windy City, and Jeff Hackett, of all people, on the way to La Belle Province. Where's the logic in this? What's Ray Jean Houle thinking about?
Well, the fact of the matter is Jocelyn Thibault asked for a trade, and apparently Mr. Houle said, yeah, okay, fine, we'll fix it up, and off to the Windy City. But to get Jeff Hackett back, it's not the answer. No. I mean, you know, I know both that's not the answer, but I hear things are still in the works. There's still a possibility of one of the goalies being packaged with Brian Savage to Toronto.
That's what I've heard.
Or Felix the Cat.
Do you think this is going to happen before Christmas, or is this just one of these nagging rumors that keeps circulating around until the trading deadline next year?
I think they're going to have to do something very quickly, because they're quickly falling out of the race. I mean, this year the parity in the Eastern Conference is
well,
just
look how
unmatched.
tight the races are. I mean, right out of the gate so far.
6 points separate the Tampa Bay Lightning, who are last in the conference, with, let me see who's leading the conference now, Philly or Pittsburgh.
This thing is wide open.
Yeah, and I mean, the fact of the matter is, if they allow themselves to fall out of contention real early now, then they're not going to have a chance to climb back into it. So I think a move has to be made, and has to be made now, for the good of the franchise, because they're just not set goaltending wise in Montreal at all.
Let's talk about the Boston Bruins for a bit, of course, from a PR standpoint, and from a lineup standpoint. I'm sure Pat Burns was going to be pretty happy to have Cam Neely back. Then Cam gives it a shot, the tryout, the comeback didn't happen. He says no, the knees just won't hold out and the hip won't hold out, so it's time to lay them down for good. Yeah,
he was smart about it. I mean, he came back, he gave it a go, and he realized that the persistent pain was a pretty good indicator that if he didn't give it up, he could be on crutches by the time he was 45, and he doesn't want that.
No.
I mean, he's made his mark. He's an all-star. He's future Hall of Famer in my estimation.
I would say so.
Cam Neely, one of the toughest, classiest acts in the game. And it's too bad that he couldn't make it, but I see good things for Boston this year. They've got a good young team. Jamie Allison last night, or Jason Allison, I'm sorry, with the game winner against his old...
Got Flames on the mind.
Yeah, indeed. Against his old team, the Washington Capitals, beat them in overtime with a beauty.
That was a rough game, too.
It was very rough. Byron Dafoe and Ole.
Knuckles flying everywhere. It's good if you like that sort of thing, but
well, this is it. But I mean, and to see the goaltenders going at it, Dafoe and Kolzig, old buddies. See you later.
He got all his jersey right over. Let's talk a little bit about the NBA lockout. Of course, this thing continues to drag on. David Stern said earlier this week that possibly they're making some headway. Then all of a sudden Friday rolls around. That's it. We're shutting it down for the weekend. We'll talk to you again on Monday. Patrick Ewing has gone on record saying that they're doing this for the good of the players in the league right now and the good for the players coming up in the future. But, I mean, from a fan standpoint, you got to be getting a little sour about this whole thing.
How much better can it get, Jimmy? How much better can it get? I mean, these guys are paid handsomely.
Handsomely, that's...
But you know something, I'll tell you, Jim, I believe that this walkout, or this lockout, will end at Christmas time when the big network contracts kick in, because there's too much money to be lost then. They're haggling and they're bickering back and forth now, but I believe they'll settle, and they'll get something settled by Christmas time, when, as I say, when the big TV contracts kick in, because they just don't want to lose that kind of money, and those contracts are huge.
Well, I mean, you see some of the hockey arenas now, and I mean, the Fleet Center in Boston is a prime example. That game on Saturday night, virtually empty. I mean, you know, can the NBA, who have never had a lockout or never had a strike to this point, can they afford to stay out any longer?
Well, no, this is it. And I mean, you would think that the NHL should be taking advantage, or that they would be coming online with the NBA offline, but it just doesn't seem to be. It just doesn't seem to be kicking in. The attendance is down all around the league, and I believe it's the ticket prices are just they're out of line now, and people the ordinary Joe just can't afford to make it go.
Especially with the Raptors getting all set to move into their brand new bar in the Air Canada Center. I mean, you know, what do they do now? I mean, they had a marketing strategy. I mean, their jerseys are the #1 sellers. Their hats, everybody loves the Raptors. But I mean, without a winning product and without the team on the hardwood, how do you sell?
Yeah, and they traded for a couple of veterans.
Exactly.
I mean, Charles Oakley and one other fellow there, I can't recall right now, but I mean, if they don't get those guys playing, and if they were to, then those trades go down the
no question. It's lost money.
It really is.
Absolutely, all the way around.
It's looking bad.
Let's turn the page to baseball for a minute. Slamming Shami Shosha takes on the National League MVP. Are you a bit surprised? I know I've talked to a few people that said, you know, Mac, 70 home runs, he should have had it, but you look at the numbers, RBI totals, home run, slugging percentage, average. Sammy had him beat all but one, the home runs.
And he played on a contending team. He kept his team in there all year. He played fabulously in September. I don't have any problems with Sammy Sosa taking home the MVP award. Mark McGuire made his note. He's very he took care of himself this year, and I think that Sammy Sosa is a good pick, and I don't have any problem with it at all.
No question. He'll go. I mean, they're both headed to the Hall of Fame the way they're playing right now. But can they come back and repeat the number of home runs that they did this year? I mean, are we going to see where 70 is, hey, someone's going to take a run at it again next year? Maybe McGuire's going to surpass that total, or maybe Sammy will hit that mark. I mean, are we going to see a repeat of this thing?
If history's any indicator, I don't think you will. I think that you'll see that they'll have good years next year, 40 home runs, maybe even 50, but I just don't see it happening again
a lot
next
of
year.
home runs.
Maybe somebody else will step up. It's time for Ken Gray to step up.
Absolutely.
You know, there's a kid right there. I mean,
takes that nosedive in September. He keeps right up there.
Always
and then
does. Yeah.
all of a
I
sudden
don't know
goes down.
if he doesn't have the stamina to stay with it for the long 162 game grind or what it is, but there's your real superstar, and he's the guy that I think is going to lead Major League Baseball into the next century.
No
Ken
question.
Griffey's a fabulous talent.
And we look forward to baseball season next year. Of course, we got to keep up with hockey season so far. Harold, a pleasure. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me.
We'll have you back on before Christmas. You can play Santa Claus this year.
Ho, ho, ho.
And thank you very much for tuning in, and we hope you had a good time, and we hope to talk to you again next Monday at 6 o'clock for Time Out here on TVNB.